Welcome back, everyone. Before we dive in, make sure you drop your thoughts and the lessons you took from this story in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's get into it. The fluorescent lights above flickered, humming faintly like nervous energy trapped between the walls. Natasha Fields stared down at her lap, her hands twisted together, thumbs rubbing over knuckles gone white. The Brooklyn family court was colder than she'd expected, despite it being July. Maybe it was just her. Robert sat at the other end of the table, lounging in his seat with the careless posture of a man convinced the world owed him something. He'd worn his most expensive suit, sharp and navy, the way he always did when he wanted to make a point. Even now, the cologne, his favorite, the one she'd bought him last Christmas, clung to the air, a sickly sweet reminder of things she could never have back. The courtroom wasn't empty. Along the far benches, strangers waited for their turn before Judge Whitaker. A tired bailiff leaned against the door, chewing the inside of his cheek. Natasha barely noticed. Her eyes kept wandering to Robert's hands, perfectly manicured, tapping a slow, steady beat against the heavy mahogany table. The same hands that once held hers through subway rides, cold winters, and hot, endless summers in their first cramped apartment in Bed-Stuy. Now those hands were strangers. She remembered every ugly detail of the past month. The divorce papers had arrived in a thick manila envelope, delivered by a man she'd never seen before. He hadn't looked her in the eye. Robert had been waiting in his BMW across the street, engine running, gaze cold as glass. No warning, no argument. When she stepped outside, clutching the papers to her chest, he rolled down the window. "Good luck starting over without anything," he'd said, his voice low and almost bored. That was the last time she'd heard him speak directly to her. Until today. The court clerk called the case, his voice echoing in the near silence. Docket number 2217. Fields versus Fields. Natasha flinched at the sound of her married name. Tamika Johnson, her attorney, leaned in and squeezed her shoulder. "Breathe, Natasha," Tamika whispered. "This isn't his victory lap. We fight today. For everything." Judge Whitaker entered, his robes swishing as he settled behind the high desk. His face was lined, his eyes tired but shrewd. Natasha saw something in his gaze, something weary but watchful. The judge took a long look at each of them, lingering a second longer on Natasha. She felt exposed, as if he could see the years in her bones. Robert's lawyer, Mr. Goodman, stood, the definition of smug in a gray three-piece suit. "Your Honor, we're here to finalize the dissolution of marriage between my client, Robert Fields, and the respondent, Natasha Fields. The terms are clear. There's a prenuptial agreement that assigns all current and future business holdings and properties to Mr. Fields. Mrs. Fields is entitled to a modest settlement." His words were slick, practiced, dismissive. Natasha's throat tightened. Tamika stood, her presence commanding in her fitted black blazer. "Your Honor, we challenge the validity and enforceability of this prenuptial agreement. We have evidence that not only did Mrs. Fields contribute significantly to the business in its formative years, but that the document in question was never properly filed with the county clerk's office. There is no witness signature, no notary stamp. We ask that the court consider the substance of the marriage, the sacrifices made, and the true origin of these assets." Robert rolled his eyes, looking straight ahead, not at Natasha. The judge raised a hand, silencing any further argument. "Let's start with testimony," Judge Whitaker said. "Mrs. Fields, please stand." Natasha's legs wobbled as she rose. Her heart thudded in her chest, so loud she worried the bailiff could hear. She spoke slowly, her voice thin at first but growing stronger with every word. "When Robert started his company, we had nothing. I worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3, just to pay the rent. I built his website. I networked with his first clients. I handled the finances when he didn't know how. When the business finally got its first investor, I was the one who convinced them to take a chance on us." She looked at Robert, whose face was stone. "Everything we have, we built together. The life we had, I was the foundation. I gave up my own career to support his." Mr. Goodman crossed his arms, his mouth twisted in a smirk. "But your name is not on the LLC. You were never an official partner, correct?" Natasha didn't flinch. That was Robert's decision. He said it would protect us from risk. I trusted him. The judge nodded, scribbling notes. Mr. Fields, would you like to respond? Robert stood slowly, drawing every eye in the courtroom. He spoke with the easy confidence of a man who believed himself untouchable. Your Honor, Natasha helped at the beginning, sure. But this company? My late nights, my risks, my vision. She handled emails. She kept the house running. But the business was always mine. He slid a folder across the table. The prenup is crystal clear. Tamika interjected. Respectfully, Your Honor, this so-called prenup is missing both a witness signature and notarization. We have documentation from the county showing it was never legally filed. Judge Whitaker took the document, holding it up to the light. His expression didn't change, but Natasha felt the tension ripple through the room. I'll be the judge of its validity, he said. Robert sat down with a flourish, glancing at Natasha with a victorious smirk. Under the table, his hand bounced his knee in a quick, nervous rhythm, one he couldn't quite control. Witnesses were called. Robert's current CFO testified, his answers clipped. Yes, Mrs. Fields was around in the early days, but she never attended board meetings. All legal and financial decisions were made by Mr. Fields. Tamika countered with old emails, social media posts, texts, evidence of Natasha negotiating contracts and attending strategy meetings in the business's infancy. The next witness was Natasha's sister, Yvette. Her voice trembled as she spoke. I watched my sister lose herself for this marriage. She gave everything to Robert, and he took it all for granted. She was there when the company was nothing but a dream and a laptop on our kitchen table. Natasha's eyes blurred, but she held back tears. More evidence. Tamika produced bank records showing joint accounts used for business expenses. Pictures of Natasha at launch events, business cards with both their names. Every new detail chipped away at Robert's confidence, his jaw tightening, lips pressed thin. The day wore on. Outside, the sun began to fade, casting long blue shadows across the courtroom floor. Natasha's muscles ached. She forced herself to stay upright, feeling the eyes of everyone in the room, waiting to see if she'd break. Finally, the judge called a recess. Natasha found herself alone in a hallway, leaning against cold tile. Tamika joined her, handing her a bottle of water. He's rattled, Tamika said, voice low. You did good. Just a little longer. Natasha nodded, swallowing past the lump in her throat. When court resumed, the mood had shifted. Robert looked less sure of himself. The judge's gaze seemed to linger on him longer, weighing something invisible. Mr. Goodman called Robert back to the stand. Mr. Fields, can you describe your financial situation at the time you married Mrs. Fields? Robert's tone was clipped, defensive. I had some debt, but big dreams. I always knew I'd make it. Natasha, she helped, but it was my drive that brought us here. Tamika's cross-examination was merciless. So, if you were so successful, why did you need Natasha's income to pay rent? Why use joint accounts for business expenses? Why is she listed as emergency contact on your company's original paperwork? Robert faltered, searching for words. That was just logistics. She was there, but this was always my vision. The judge's voice cut through the courtroom like a knife. Let's talk about the prenup. Mr. Fields, do you have proof this document was filed with the county, as required by New York law? Goodman shuffled papers. We have a copy, Your Honor. The original should be with the clerk. Tamika slid a stamped letter across the table. Your Honor, this is a certified response from the county clerk's office. No record of a filing in 2014 or any subsequent year. The document isn't signed by any witness. Unnotarized. A hush fell over the room. Even the bailiff stood up straighter. Robert's face drained of color, and his hands, finally, stopped moving. Judge Whitaker leaned back, steepling his fingers, gaze sharp as broken glass. Mr. Fields, this is a serious omission. The law requires a prenup to be properly executed, witnessed, notarized, and filed. Without those things, it carries no legal weight. Robert tried to interrupt, but his voice cracked. Your Honor, this isn't right. She's just. The judge held up a hand, silencing him. Enough. For a moment, the only sound was Natasha's heartbeat, hammering in her ears. She stared at Robert, who finally met her gaze. And for the first time, she saw panic where there'd been only smugness before. The judge continued, voice heavy, final. Based on all evidence presented, emails, financial documents, witness testimony, and the failure to execute and file the prenuptial agreement, the court finds in favor of Mrs. Fields. The properties, the business, the holdings, all shall be awarded to Mrs. Fields. There will be no split. Mr. Fields, you are entitled to a portion of the joint savings and one vehicle. The rest is awarded to Mrs. Fields. The business, in its entirety, belongs to her. The air was knocked out of the room. Mr. Goodman fumbled for words, but the judge had already moved on, scribbling the final order. Robert's face shifted, shock, then disbelief, then a hollow sort of silence. The cocky smile, the knowing smirk, all of it vanished, leaving only a blank stare. He started to speak, but the words caught in his throat. Natasha held his gaze, calm and unreadable, her jaw set like iron. The clerk handed Judge Whitaker the last stack of paperwork. The judge signed with a heavy hand and then looked directly at Natasha. You may be seated, Mrs. Fields. The court's decision is final. Natasha lowered herself into the chair, not trusting her legs. Her hands lay flat on the table, fingers steady now. Robert's attorney turned to him, whispering something urgent. But Robert just sat there, silent, unmoving, lost in the echo of a future he thought was his. The judge dismissed the case. The bailiff called for order as people began to shuffle out. Natasha didn't move. She felt every eye on her, the stares, the curiosity, the silent judgments. But she didn't flinch. The weight in her chest was still there, but now it felt different. Solid. Final. Robert still hadn't moved. He was staring at nothing, his hands limp on the table. The pen dropped on the floor at his feet. No more words left. No more threats. He looked smaller than she'd ever seen him, the shell of a man whose empire had just slipped away. Tamika stood behind Natasha, a silent presence. She didn't say a word, just placed a gentle hand on Natasha's shoulder, anchoring her in the moment. Natasha finally stood, gathering her bag, every movement deliberate and precise. She looked at Robert one last time. Their eyes met, just for a second. There was nothing left to say. She turned away, walking toward the door as the room emptied behind her. The last sound Natasha heard as she stepped into the hallway was the heavy wooden door clicking shut, sealing away the decade they'd shared, and everything he thought he could take from her. If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, and share this video with your friends. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a powerful story drop.